Okay, I got all my stuff I need for bias tape. You can use the store-bought kind, or you can make your own, whichever easier for you. I like making my own because I like mine to be on the extra wide side. But if you buy it, you're going to buy the single fold. This is 1-inch wide bias tape, and they fold it in 1/4 of an inch on each side, and they call this single fold bias tape. So if you're going to use this for the inside of your cap, you're going to take it on your ironing machine and you're going to open up one side and iron this flat. And this is what you're going to use to sew around the inside of your cap like this, so that when you turn it, this is going to go up underneath, and that is what you're going to do for your casing. You're actually using this bias tape as a casing. This is your double fold. This is your inch wide double fold. Same thing. We've got the single fold here, and then they've gone ahead and folded it again, and they call that double fold. This is also usable, but you're going to have to open up the one fold and then another fold and iron that flat, and you can use that also as your inside bias tape. They have the extra wide now double fold bias tape, or the extra wide single fold bias tape. This is also usable. You're going to open it up and open up another one of your folds, and you're going to, from the middle fold, cut off 1/4 of an inch on the inside, and then you can use that as your bias tape to go around the inside of your doll cap. Any of these are usable, so whichever ones you have, you just can iron them flat and use them. It's up to you however you want to, whether you want to make your own. I like making my own. But for these caps, you need anywhere from 13 to 14 inches of bias tape. So when you cut fabric on a bias, you can either cut it at a 60-degree or a 45-degree. For the bias tape I'm using on these caps, 60 degrees is just fine. So I need 13 to 14 inches. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to line my 60-degree bias up against my salvage of my fabric, and then I'm going to determine where to make my cut, so I have at least 14 inches of fabric. So we've got 20 inches to say 3 inches, that's 17, so I don't need that much fabric. So let me move it in a little bit. So now I'm 20 to 7, that's 13 inches. So let me go back, just to be on the safe side. Okay, so I'm going to make my first cut here with my rotary cutter. Oh, I didn't make a very straight cut. I usually stand up doing this. When you get this kind of fabric cut with your rotary, it means that your blade is really time for a change. It's time to change your blade up. Okay, let me just move that out of the way. Now I'll be able to get a straighter cut on there. Okay, so that's my 60-degree bias, and I have plenty of stretch in there. So I'm going to just even that up again because I made such a mess of it. Okay, I kind of like having my bias tape a little bit over that inch that you need your bias tape to be. So I'm going to go just a fraction of an inch over. So I'm going to count. I have my 4 lines. This is my inch mark. So I'm going to go 1 inch and maybe not even a 1/16, maybe between a 1/16 and an 1/8. I'm going to make my cut. Okay, so now I've got my piece of bias tape, and I've got 14 inches, just what I needed. Okay. Alright, so now I've got that cut, and I've saved this for more bias tape in the future. So let me go ahead and put this away and get out my ironing board. Okay, so get your ironing board out and turn your heat on. If you don't have a bias tape maker, that's not a problem, because you can just turn this up 1/4 of an inch and iron it. Or if you have one of these, they're called bias tape makers. I've got both sizes. I've got my 1 inch and I've got my, here's my 1 inch and I've got my 1/2 inch bias tape. For the 1 inch, it says to cut your fabric 1 7/8. I don't. I cut mine about 2 1/16. So, because I like my bias tape to touch in the middle. If you run it through the way it says to, you're going to have a little gap in between the bias tape. Some people like that. I don't, because especially if you're using, like here on the double fold, see there's like at least 1/4 of an inch in between those two folds. If I was using a dark fabric and I wanted to case that in there, you would be able to see the color difference between the red and the dark of the dark fabric. I don't want that. So when I make my bias tape, I make sure that when they come in, they're touching like it is on this orange, because I don't want any of my other contrasting fabric to show through, especially dark on light. So, like I said, for here on the 1 inch bias tape, on the 1/2 inch bias tape, I'm sorry, it says to use 7/8 of fabric. I don't. I'm using that 1 1/16, and it's not a problem. It still fits through the machine just fine. So let me go ahead and iron that out. Okay, so now I'm going to, this is your puller. There's a little thing that you can pull your thread, your fabric through. These are kind of expensive, but they're worth every penny. This one's $5.99 at Hobby Lobby, and the bigger one was $6.49. And I've seen them as wide as, was it 2 or 3 inches for quilt binding. They also have that if you're going to make quilt binding. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to feed my fabric. There's actually a little space in between there that you can feed your fabric through. If your fabric is resistant, there's a slot on the bottom where you can take a needle and grab the fabric and push it through, like I'm going to have to do. Okay, so we've got that, and I'm pushing it through until I can get it out the other side. Okay, so now that that's through, I'm going to push it back in a little bit because it's too far. And because I did a little bit wider fabric than the instructions tell you to, I'm going to have to actually use my fingers to make this the size that I want it to be. If I did it exactly like the instruction says, I would have had a perfect pull out of bias tape, and it would have came out with that space, a little bit of space in the middle. But since I wanted a little on the extra wide side, I made it thicker than what the instructions call for. So I'm only going to press on one side of this bias tape because I only need it pressed on one side. If this was already made bias tape, I would have to unpress it, but because I'm making it myself, I'm actually pressing the one side of the bias tape down. Okay, so do you see how I'm getting a seam? I'm getting a fold on one side only. I saw, my friend sent me a video where a lady had put a needle on her sewing machine, on her fabric of her ironing board, and pulled it through that away, and she was able to get a nice bias tape out of that too. I tried it, but it didn't work well for me. So So like I said, if you don't have one of these little machines, don't worry about it. Just fold up 1/4 of an inch on one side of your strip and iron it down. Works just as well. Okay, so now I've got my 14-inch strip of bias tape, and I'm ready to attach it to my hat. So I'm going to take my hat, and I'm going to pin this to the outside of my cap. So I'm going to start in the back, on the very back panel piece. You don't have to, it's just preference. I'm going to do it, but now because this is what's going to show in the front, I'm going to tuck this in 1/4 of an inch and pin it, so that when I sew my 1/4 of an inch all the way around and I turn this to the right side, this is going to be what you see in the front. You're going to have no raw edge. It's going to be a nice smooth finish, because the next one that comes around is going to be on the top of this one, so you're not going to see any raw edge. So let's go ahead and I'm going to put the bias tape on before I put the elastic. So I'm going to pin this all the way around and get ready to sew it on my sewing machine. Okay, so when you get to the point where you're doing the cap, the same thing, you're going to pin it down just like it was the rest of any other fabric. Okay, so one thing you do when you're sewing this is you're going to, when you're sewing this on the sewing machine, you're going to make sure that when you turn this over that you've got that sewed all the way past that tip of the cap. Also, what I do is I sew back and forth to reinforce this about 4 or 5 times back and forth across here for extra stability. Okay, so I'm going to put my iron away, I'm going to finish pinning this, and then I'm going to put it on the sewing machine and show you how to finish this up.